Here is Barack Obama giving a eulogy to John Lewis. In the main, I'm not terribly interested in what Obama has to say. However, because of the things that he talks about at John Lewis's funeral, and the fact that Bernie Sanders echoed part of it anyways.
Bernie Sando sounds delicious.
Yeah, I like Bernie Sando.
And
make one of those later.
That Obama is so close to Biden and probably, in many respects, responsible for Biden winning the primary, or at least, was enough of a force of leverage that Biden feels that he probably owes Obama, because he does. Here is Obama at John Lewis's funeral, basically calling for the end of the filibuster, which is a big deal.
Once we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, we should keep marching to make it even better by making sure every American is automatically registered to vote, including former inmates who've earned their second chance. By adding polling places and expanding early voting and making Election Day a national holiday. So if you are somebody who's working in a factory, or you're a single mom who's got to go to her job and doesn't get time off, you can still cast your ballot by guaranteeing that every American citizen has equal representation in our government, including the American citizens who live in Washington, D.C. and in Puerto Rico. They're Americans. By ending some of the partisan gerrymandering so that all voters have the power to choose their politicians, not the other way around. And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
I mean, that's a big deal, because there seems to be now a broad-based support. Like I say, Bernie Sanders came out shortly after that moment and said he supported getting rid of the filibuster, which is a new position for him. He has been somewhat of an institutionalist when it comes to these Senate rules. And the idea of getting rid of the filibuster, first of all, makes the Senate, which is a incredibly undemocratic, small d body, slightly more democratic in some fashion. And the idea of enfranchising DC voters, and I know it's more controversial when to say this about Puerto Rican voters, but these, I'll tell you what's important about these. And of course, the Voting Rights Act, repairing the Voting Rights Act. These are measures which are both fundamentally more democratic, again, small d, and also ones that will enhance the power of Democrats, big D, at least in terms of establishing some type of beachhead. You'll notice when Republicans get in office, what they do is start passing legislation that will strengthen their ability to get reelected. Democrats never do this. And they should not only stop with this. Now, maybe John Lewis is not necessarily the thematically consistent with that, but they should be passing card check. I don't think they will, because I don't think they want unions to have that much power, but maybe eventually, if there's enough progressives elected, it's going to take a while. But look, you start re-enfranchising people, you start making it easier to vote for people, maybe you start getting the power of Amy McGrath's money doesn't beat the power of Charles Booker's supporters, grassroots support in a place like Kentucky. I don't know if either one of them could go on to beat McConnell, but that's an example of where these structural reforms, making voting easier for people, will both strengthen Democrats, but also strengthen democracy. And the more democracy we have, the more we will get, it seems to me. And so this is a big deal and it's interesting also that he labeled it Jim Crow, because once Obama does that, right, it starts to get into, and then it's like Kristen Sinema, you're not going to vote against the Jim Crow era filibuster.
Well, and it's also significant because the corporate interests that were behind Obama they took advantage of that filibuster during his administration, right? Like that was often an issue. Wasn't the filibuster big in that? Yeah, the healthcare stuff, right? Like
didn't Joe Lieberman filibuster the public option? Am I remembering that correctly?
Joe Lieberman didn't filibuster. I mean, that was more of it wasn't so much a filibuster. It was a negotiation. I mean, what will happen? I mean, understand
a regular buster.
Yeah. I mean, understand what will happen. It's going to move the power from a couple of, I don't believe that there are any moderate Republicans, but the closest to the center Republicans. It's going to move the power from them to someone like Manchin and Sinema, or Hickenlooper, or the guy, I can't remember his name now. Geez, in Arizona, Mark. I can't remember his name. It's going to move the power to the more conservative Democrats, because they are going to be the deciding votes on these things. And that we're going to have to contend with that. But at the very least, what it's going to do is it's going to allow for more conventional pressure to be put on the Democratic Party, because they will not have the fig leaf of the Republicans preventing this stuff from happening. I mean, and if you look at the Biden years, knock on wood that they happen, as I do, you will see them as years where there will be significant gains, I think, for the left, because it will make it very clear why we can't have good things.
Centrist.
And by good, it is going to make these elected officials more accountable. And that's basically what we're looking at. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth about this, but I think that is a fairly strong argument in favor of having a Democrat for the left to fight against. My God,
that was always my theory about Hillary Clinton.
It would have been great. She would have been perfect.
On the other hand, Trump
I think Joe Biden will be good in the same way, because I think it's going to be really clear on where, like all this stuff where, like, ranging from we're friends with David Frum all the way through to, this is I mean, I went through this after the Bush years. Like, it became clear by 2010, like that dude who would come on Air America and sounded like everybody else is not like me. That we have a different set of values, and it becomes very clear, where who's with us on the left and who's not.
Yeah.
And that's very, very helpful, because then you start to realize, like, well, this is where we got to fight for. This is where, this increases the pressure on Democratic politicians who may be, sort of marginally there in some way. You can show up and you can be part of the progressive caucus in Congress, and you don't have to hold any beliefs because it's so squishy. And when it becomes down to the point, like, Democrats are responsible for what we do or do not get, period, it becomes really clear on which Democrats, where they actually stand. And I think that's very helpful because the reality is, at least for, the near term, we have two parties in this country. And there's one where we have significantly or marginally, whatever you want to call it, better shot of getting the policies we want from one of them as opposed to the other, just because they're more reliant. And it's just really going to be a question of like, it's going to be a much easier argument to say that so-and-so in the Democratic Party is a problem when they actually have to make a vote that counts.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, I think the Trump era has been very good at bringing out just your garden variety liberals into these mass movements, which create openings for them to then be radicalized and moved further to the left that maybe we wouldn't have had them there if it weren't for Trump.
I think there's some of that, but I also think that's also why Bernie got blown out in the primaries, is because those people actually just want to go normal and we haven't sufficiently radicalized them. So, I mean, I think the people that, I mean, I do think a lot of people have been radicalized over the course of the last 4 years. I think a much better case that, say, put Biden back in, those brunch liberals stop, showing up to primary elections, and we can start to actually get some work done.
Yeah. I mean, radicalized or even just politicized, right? Because I can't stop thinking about the number of people who said that they support Medicare for all or even socialism as a concept, but still voted for Biden because they thought that he had the best chance of beating Trump, right? And I've talked about this before through the lens of depoliticization, where people might believe in a better world. They might think that that would be nice, but they don't believe that it's possible. So they only think they have to choose from the options that they've been presented with their entire lives.
Well, I think, look, we don't have to choose really now between a larger subset of people becoming politicized and, reacting to Joe Biden, because that's just where we are at this point. And so those people who, were saying we should have Medicare for all, we're going to vote for Joe Biden because I think he's got a better chance of beating Donald Trump. In a Joe Biden era, that's when those people are going to go like, oh, well, we can have this now.
I hope so.
Let's have. Well, I hope so too. Who knows?
Also, I mean, Trump was nice, but I think a pandemic and depression are going to be enough for the left's propaganda for the left to make propaganda use of.
Yeah, probably. It's almost like he heard people saying that George W. Bush had more bodies on him, and he was like, "We'll see about that."
We'll see about that.
What about domestically?
Yeah, he wasn't, not so much domestically. I'll see if I can do that. It's always important to be a superlative.